Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 144 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to finish up our Fundamentals of Marksmanship series, and this one is about going back to basics and shooting the important parts of becoming and then staying a great marksman. So I think this is a good way to finish up the Fundamentals series. I brought Richard back in. He's back joining us on the podcast. Say hello, Richard.
Yeah, good morning. 144 episodes. That's quite an achievement, I must say.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot of work.
It is. It is. We've been trying to do one a week as a commitment. Pretty amazing how they start to add up, though.
Yeah, that's good. It's like chapters in a book.
It is. Somebody had asked about if we would ever want to write a book, and I said all I'd have to go back and do is like take all the last 144 episodes, half hour at a time, and start peeling everything out of it because we're trying to share everything on this. So it's a lot of fun. So. Right. But it ought to be a really great podcast. So Richard's going to join us in on this one. We had a really awesome gentleman up from Florida yesterday. Got a chance to shoot in some 60-degree weather. So it ought to be a good one. So stick around. Here we go. All right, before we get started, I do want to say a quick thanks to TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers, and they make them for lots of different makes and models. We use them here because they're safe, they're super high quality, and easy to install. So if you want to upgrade your rifle, factory or custom, stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine custom rifle barrels. They are cut rifle, they are hand-lapped, they are some of the best in the world. And they have a new program called Krieger Direct where you can purchase your barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So in this time and age, that's really important. So if you want a super high quality barrel and you want it now, stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com. All right, before we get started on this one, I have a little note here to thank Kevin Luke. Kevin was the winner of our logbook that we gave away, so thank you, Kevin. We really appreciate that. Wanted to give you a shout out on the air and say congratulations, and thank you for chiming in on Facebook and being part of the competition. We really appreciate it. And this one here, we're really going to dive into the fundamentals. And I often say this, and although I'm not sure if it comes across correctly or if it's always the right timing, but going back to basics when things go wrong. So we had a gentleman, Don, up from Florida yesterday, Richard. We had him out the range a little bit.
Yeah, beautiful winter weather here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It was amazing. What was it, 60 degrees out there?
He brought the Florida sunshine with him.
Although he was complaining it wasn't warm enough.
Yeah. When we were outside, I noticed we were making a wind call and we were talking about the winds here.
And we were wearing short shirt sleeves.
Yeah, and he had a jacket on. He was actually, you could see he was shivering a little bit. He was pretty cold. I guess Florida will spoil you for that. But here we go from 20 below to 60 to 20 below.
Right. Yeah.
We feel like we're sick all the time because we're in the worst of both worlds. But he had come in and the theme for this podcast was about finishing up the fundamental series and talking about the basics and going back to it all the time. And it was funny because we were talking at the range yesterday.
That's right.
And one of the first things he said was
fundamentals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gave a story of he was a Vietnam veteran. He was a sniper in Vietnam for the Marine Corps. He has a lot of trigger time and he could shoot. I mean, he was pretty good on a rifle. We're blessed he come up and decided to choose a rifle with us, and we'll post a picture up on Facebook and just show you a beautiful red rifle that we did. But he was telling us a story about in training how he got shipped out and got assigned to another training assignment, I guess you would say. And the guy was just barking, of course, and it was all going back to basics.
Mm-hmm.
And, he had said about how important that was and how he thought about, in hindsight, how guys forget. Like guys would come back stateside after being deployed. They don't get a chance to practice and shoot as much.
Yeah, well, I think it's when I was trying to understand what he was explaining there, it seemed to me afterwards on my long drive home that, you can get, he was deployed, right? So he's in firefights, which is, absolute melee. And then, we're talking about, well, it's a one-way range and we're training, right? So you can lose sight of fundamentals when the melee's on. And I think what happens then, it's good for the rest of us, is that you think you're trained up until the point where you start losing the plot a little bit. And you have to have a base of, you have to have a base that you can go back to, right? So you can get back to, enforcing that you go through the fundamentals to get to the perfect shot, rather than just expecting that I got to this peak level, I was shooting really, really good, I'm going to continue in that fashion without having to put any effort in that's back to the fundamentals or back to the basics.
When you go to a match and the pressure's on and you're expecting that natural ability to be there, and say, we talked about it with riding a motorcycle, maybe last year, the year before, we're talking about, the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? But having that core fundamentals, like I was on CERT teams, you get excited, guys forget. They do silly things that they normally wouldn't do under that pressure. And so you got to have that baseline of super solid fundamentals that it almost becomes instinctive.
And that's a good way of putting it, instinctive, because you need to be at a point where you don't need, again, Richard's golfing analogies here, you don't want to be in the situation where you're thinking about every shot. But you can only do that by training enough on the fundamentals when you're not under pressure. So if you train, British Army used to say, train hard, fight easy, right? That was one of the methods that they used to say to us was, it doesn't matter how hard you train, you've got to train harder and you'll fight easy. So I think you need to get to the point, if you're a competitive shooter, that you can do, you can spend 70% of your mental agility when you're on the gun thinking about the wind, thinking about position, thinking about what you need to think about for the competitive situation, and only 30% of your mental agility needs to be put into driving the rifle. The only way you can do that successfully is to have driving the rifle become second nature, and the only way you can do that is by training, practice, and practicing the fundamentals so that you're always going at it the same way. That's the way I look at it.
It's like the difference between grasping something and blinking and breathing. It has to be an automatic.
Yeah, I mean, it's the race car driver, right? The race car driver, when that car gets loose, he's the happiest, but he doesn't think about turning the wheel into the slide. He's already doing it before he even thinks about it. And then the next thing he's thinking about is position on the road and where he's trying to get to be fastest through that corner to beat his competitors. And he doesn't have to think about, driving the slide.
Yeah, I mean, great point. You don't think about blinking.
Right.
You don't think about breathing.
Yep.
If you're
Fortunately.
unless you stop for a long period of time, right? But it's the same thing with shooting and fundamentals. You have to have that core value so down that the only thing, like, I think I'd said it in the past where I remember one of my favorite matches. It was like all I had to do was put the reticle on the target and pull the trigger, and the bullet was getting there. It was like I was putting in the least amount of effort and having some of the best results I ever had, and I felt like something was wrong.
Right, and at that point, you're able to spend more time worrying about what the wind's doing, where our position is against the target, to the target, all that other stuff that makes the difference when you start competing, rather than actually the function of pulling the trigger. All that work happened beforehand, and you're just able to focus on, the actual, the shot that you need to take. And it's not the fundamentals of pulling the trigger. It's all the other things that make it successful for first round hits if you're in that kind of an environment.
Yeah. And you're going through the process. So you're not just, but you're an autopilot but you're not, like you're going through the fundamentals while you're shooting. They're there, but they're almost embedded automatically, and you're recognizing things wrong rather than right. So
that's right.
You're preemptively dealing with them while you're focusing on the actual target and shooting and the wind and all the other things. It was a pretty cool place to be for a long time.
Yeah. And it's funny because we were out shooting, was it last week or the week before? And it was another nice, warm, sunny day, and I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And basically, I was just not following through.
Yeah.
And you were shooting okay, but I wasn't. And I wasn't shooting to my normal standard, put it like that. And it was just like, yeah, I just need to slow down a little bit. And then, because we're all rusty, we haven't shot that much over the winter here. We never do. And so we run into that same old problem where you kind of really need to get back to basics a little bit and just spend some time under no pressure, just go to the range, just, take a couple of boxes and just take your time. And that's kind of what you got to do,
You do. So the point of this podcast here is really talking about going back to basics for those that are experienced in shooting, and then not just going back to basics, but also recognize when you need to. Like, if you go to the range and you know you're rusty that day, don't put the pressure on you. Accept where you're at and your abilities. Enjoy your day, and just know that, hey, I got to get back on the bike and start pedaling again.
Yep, and just know that no one's shooting back at you. That's always the key. That's what I always say to people. It's like, it doesn't matter how bad a day you get. If there's no one shooting back at you, it's a good day.
Yeah. So the two things that, if I can give some solid advice, and what I would say is, first and foremost, you have got to get out and shoot. You cannot read about this and study this and be a pupil of the science and the art more than pulling the trigger. It's like, if you study flying and you can read a gazillion books and take 100 online classes, but that first 30 seconds on the runway, when you throttle up and you release the brakes, you'll learn more taking that airplane off the ground in that first 30 seconds, because there's feelings involved. You've got all these senses alive. You're feeling everything, the rattling, the wind, the movements. These are things that happen in shooting. And so you can be a pupil and never shoot at all well. Right. So my first advice is, you have got to commit to get out and pull the trigger a lot.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what either, right? It could be your match rifle or it could be a 22. You're still going to learn from every shot.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So if you don't have the opportunity to go shoot long range all the time, God forbid, I would never suggest anyone just sit at the bench and shoot groups. That's like, that's like torture to me. But it doesn't hurt to, just get out. And even if you've only got time to, take a box of 22s and go out, that's what you can, and you can get a lot out of that.
You can. Because
you'll see bad habits coming up with your 22 just as much as you will with your match rifle. The only thing you're missing really is recoil.
Yeah, so if you're getting out 3 times over the summer and pulling the trigger, just going out and messing around, you're not growing and you're not learning.
That's not enough.
And you are going to be really, really rusty. And when the time comes that you have to make that shot on that big game animal, you're not going to be confident.
Yeah, that's where you got to pull it in and only shoot things that are 100 yards or 200 yards away.
You're going to be nervous. You're like the guy getting to the edge of the tower doing, jumping off with a rope. You're like, oh shit, this, that's how it's going to feel. The pucker effect's going to be in full force.
The nervousness will come because inside you haven't had enough trigger time to take the shot.
Yeah, and I think too, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but you have to earn the right to take the shot, and in your own mind, and this is your own, you have to set your own standards here.
Set your own limits, yeah.
You're right, but you're going to know that I didn't do the work for this shot. You're going to be nervous, and you're going to be like, not 100% confident. If you've practiced and you've earned it, when that shot's there, you're going to be like, I got this.
Yeah, no problem.
You're still going to have the anxiety and anticipation, or you still have a little nerves involved, right?
Good. Shows you're alive.
Right. But you've earned the right to take it.
Right.
And so I guess, we were talking about this with air rifles too. I know we sort of left it go for a little bit till SHOT Show was done, but we've talked about the value of air rifles in training, and just how far they've come, how accurate they are, and the fact that you can practice in your backyard in most places in the United States.
Yep.
Where you couldn't shoot your rifle.
That's right.
And the value of, it's really inexpensive to shoot, really expensive guns sometimes, but that's, you can buy a $300 one, or you can buy a $3,000 air rifle.
Yep.
But the value of that trigger time, like we know guys that we've talked to in the past that have like 70-yard and 100-yard pieces of small steel, they'll go back for 10, 20 minutes in their backyard in a rural area, set up safely, and practicing some trigger time, shooting some groups.
The only one thing I would recommend, though, if people have not been into air rifles, like I think I probably got my first air rifle when I was in the age 10 range. But a lot of the modern PCPs, as against the Springers, the triggers are completely different. So if you want a trigger that will align better with a match rifle like we would shoot as a field rifle stroke a hunting rifle, you're probably going to want to get a Springer more than you're going to get a PCP. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with PCPs. I only own one myself, but it has a very, very light trigger, and it can't get up to Richard's 1.75 pounds, which I love. And so, just something to consider. If you're going to buy one, you need to go test or catch up with some people who are very knowledgeable, call into shops. There's a bunch of shops now. I won't shout out any, but I've been using one in particular for stuff that I bought recently, and they're in the southern part of the country. So, I would call them up and ask them, tell them what you're trying to do. A lot of those guys do shoot centerfire as well, and they'll know. They'll know expressly what to go for and what to keep away from.
And we have talked to FX and over the last year and had several conversations. When we get into the new building, along with those and some others, we may eventually try to bring in some air rifle trainers because
new
of
building,
the
Jamie.
Yeah, how about that? So we did a little podcast last week, but we closed on our new building. We're getting stuff ready, all of our licenses and stuff to start ready, moving April 1st.
Yep.
So we're really excited. And what's cool is it will give us an opportunity to have more area to do more things from all of the different aspects of building custom rifles and shooting that we do.
Adding some product lines.
And we've talked about bringing in some high-quality air rifles for trainers. Now, the guys that shoot a lot of air rifles, they'll tell you that it's still different than a bolt-action rifle with the recoil and noise and everything else, but trigger time's trigger time.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean, I shoot Springers and I shoot PCP, so I kind of know a little bit, not a lot. I know a little bit about this, and it is different.
And I think, too, that with the modern 22 long rifles, as well as some of the air rifles, their ability to shoot even 200 and 300 yards is just, in my mind, it's crazy.
It's like shooting a 22 at that distance. It is. Because, you've got a fairly light projectile. It's not, it's super affected by the wind. So, you got the inherent accuracy of the rifle, and then you've got the wind effect, which can be huge. So it's a little different from what I grew up shooting. Like, I used to have a block of wood with, 2mm holes drilled in it, and then matchsticks in it, and you'd try and shoot the matchsticks out at 10 yards, and then 15 yards, and 20 yards.
Oh, that's funny.
And you're trying to shoot the tops off the matchsticks. Oh.
I can't really say on the air what we used our air rifles for when I was a kid. So, yeah, we were cleaning up critters in our neighborhood. So, but yeah, it's just amazing that they're not your Red Ryder BB guns from the 60s and 70s.
No, a lot of them, and as I think we've talked about before, there's a huge move nowadays to get to larger calibers as well. So you'll see, 30 caliber and 40 caliber and 50 caliber, and you'll see people shooting crazy animals with them. Oh, which just reminds me, I saw a bobcat on the drive-in this morning.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, we're in Pennsylvania. It's the first time I've seen one in Pennsylvania. Sorry, I had to interrupt with that.
Oh, that's okay. What was
it? Was I was driving down the Turnpike 76, for those people who aren't familiar with this area, and there's a lot of farmland as you're heading into Laurel Highlands, which is the area that's just near where we are in Somerset. And there's an old farm on the right-hand side of the road, and the bobcat was sitting there all alert, staring at something like he was just about to pounce on it, and he was right beside the road. It was so cool. I've only ever seen one other bobcat, and it was in the Shenandoah Park. First thing in the morning, on a misty morning, it just sauntered across the road in front of me on the 100-mile drive there.
They're pretty distinct when you see them, too, because of their face, their ears, the black tips, and
it was so cool. It's when I lived in Jersey, I used to see black bear all the time because we had a huge population of black bear in Sussex County, and literally driving to work, literally every week, I would see a black bear.
Oh wow!
And just I've never seen a black bear in Pennsylvania yet.
No, I seen the first one when I was probably in my late 30s.
Yeah,
ever. In the wild, and I think I've seen one more since.
Yeah.
I've tried really hard without being in big groups, like pushing them, because we can't bait them and we can't call them here. I tried several years when I was younger to sort of track them down in the snow and really get after them for 3 days and never harvest one. But the bobcats are pretty neat.
Yeah, that was very cool.
And they lay a beating on the deer population too. They are certainly alpha predators, and they'll they'll definitely take young deer, and I'm told even bigger deer. I'm not sure about full size, but I'm told that they really will get after some of the bigger animals. They're not afraid of them, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, it's a, 40, 50-pound predator?
Yeah.
It's big enough to do some damage.
Yeah, I wouldn't win one chasing me.
Yeah, that's right.
That's pretty cool.
Sorry to interject, but that was pretty cool start to my day.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. They're around. The other thing we want to touch base on, this one right here, is just if you get in trouble, if you get rusty, like we were talking to Don yesterday.
Like Richard is.
Like we all are. I mean, we certainly aren't on a... We go into hibernation here. Like everybody says, yeah, you should be able to practice year round and, suck it up, buttercup. It's 20 below zero, 2 feet of snow. So what? Go out and shoot, right?
Yeah.
That sucks. When the ice and the snow and you can't find your brass because you can't feel your fingers after 5 minutes. Your face is sticking to the gun. I mean, we try. It's not from a lack of wanting to, but we're rusty in the spring up here all the time, every year. You just got to get out. It's almost like relearning to ride your bicycle that's been in their garage all year, and not that you can't get on it, get after it quickly, but you feel it in the spring. You don't have your confidence underneath you. You're still, getting comfortable with the gun again, and it's finding its home place. Mm-hmm. So my recommendation for anyone that's rusty is, and we talked about this before, is don't rely on what your abilities was last year, last week, or yesterday. You're only as good as the shooters you are right now. And if you rely on what you used to be able to do, you're going to have a lot of bad shots. You have to go out and keep practicing, or you will. I mean, shooting skills they will dull over time. You'll lose it.
Yep.
You don't forget it, but you will certainly not be sharp. So go back to basics.
What you will forget is you'll forget to apply the fundamentals. You'll think, I got this, up until the point where you realize you don't got this.
Yep.
And then you've got to realize that the only way to keep consistency and keep at a high level of skill is that you've got to train, and you've got to go back to fundamentals and push those. I
remember like years ago where in the spring, younger, and you're trying to get really good at this, but in the spring, I would have to train my butt off because I knew that I wasn't sharp. You're getting to that certain level, and by the end of summer, we were varmint hunting all the time. We're going to matches. You're really sharp on your A game, but then December hits, November, December. There's not a lot of matches, at least back in those days, in those time frames. But I think we went to one in South Carolina.
Yeah, that was springish, right?
Springish, yeah. But it was hard for us to get out and do much shooting in the winter. But boy, you would know it. In the spring, you just felt like you were dancing with two left feet. You weren't sharp.
Right.
Man, I used to have to train my butt off to get back to where it's like you did all this work, and then you had to go and redo it again every year.
And it's especially difficult if you don't have access to a range that's, really...
Yeah.
On the way to work, on the way back from work, or can be on the way to work, on the way back from work.
Oh, yeah.
It can be, when I was in Jersey, for instance, it was an hour and 15 minutes to a 300-yard range that was full of rules because they were, service rifle shooting, and they had, ready on the right, ready on the left.
Oh, yeah.
So it took an hour to shoot a relay. And it was a major commitment just to get to the range. So that was pretty bad. And then I was lucky because a friend of a friend of a friend had a small holding farm, and he's like, oh, you can come down and shoot whatever you want down here. We've got like 25 acres. So that got me. And then I would shoot 22. That I did 90% of my shooting with my 22. And that was really good, because I think the best thing that you get out of shooting the 22, apart from obviously trigger pull, is that you really get to catch the nuances of the wind.
Yeah.
Because once you start shooting 75 or 100 yards, it really starts moving the projectile. So once you've got an accurate 22 that'll, if you get a 22 that'll shoot half-inch groups at 50 yards, that's an accurate 22. And then you can start pushing that out, and it's not just the rifle losing the plot, right? It's the wind that's moving the projectile, and then you can start working with that. And that's what I did. I spent all those times we were shooting together, I hardly ever shot my actual centerfire rifle. It was all just shooting 22.
Well, if I remember correctly, you had a 40X 700 clone that was set in your chassis.
Yes. So it was a mimic of my match rifle. The only problem with it was a trainer, but it wasn't a repeater, so it made things hard. And then I swapped over to a CZ 452, which I still have, which was more accurate and was a repeater, so you could actually sort of push yourself through some stages and do some things that were under time pressure.
Yeah, now with CZ taking the lead and rimfire becoming so popular, there's a lot of aftermarket chassis that will fit CZs that will mirror your match gun. Where back when Richard was shooting, they made the 40X Remington 700, which was a clone to the 700 short action, just fed Remington, or just was a 22 long rifle.
Right, so mine was an old trainer that I managed to pick up because they had these old 40X trainers that they had available for 22s that were part of like ROTC.
Or CMP.
Or something. Anyway, I managed to get a hold of one. And, it really was the same as a centerfire rifle. It weighed a freaking ton, which was in my mind pointless, right? It's a 22.
But it would fit in your chassis.
But I dropped it into an AICS chassis, so that was good. So it just felt the same, right? So got on the gun. I tried it. I couldn't scope it with another Schmidt and Bender, but I put it on another. I put on another scope that had a decent reticle on it. I can't remember what it was I had on it. I think it was a Vortex that I had on it at the time, but it was pretty good, and it was certainly good enough to shoot out 200 yards. And it had a ranging reticle on it, and you could do all those things that you could do with the Schmidt. It just wasn't quite as nice,
right?
But anyway, that was beside the point. You were able to train with it, and then the downsides were it wasn't a repeater. So then I ended up picking up a 452, and I still have that. And I ended up just throwing it in a Boyd's stock. Yeah, so that was as close as I could get to a chassis with the repeater. And it was obviously it's a wood, right? The Boyd's hardwood stock. So I just bedded the receiver into that. And it shoots great, leisure barrel on it, and it's a half-inch. I mean, it's a legitimate half-inch gun at 50 yards with Federal Auto Match, which is cheap
stuff to shoot.
Cheap stuff to shoot. Yeah. Well, it used to be cheaper, but it's still relatively inexpensive.
I ended up going the route with 223 because I couldn't find a good 40X, and sometimes they're hard to find and really expensive. And it was just easier because it was a 700 clone to put in my chassis and to build a twin match gun to my match gun.
Right. Right.
Where in your case, it still was a 700 clone, which was pretty awesome for the original.
Yeah, and of course, if I'd gone the route of 223, which was a great route to go, I still would have been stuck because I wouldn't have been able to really legitimately shoot it at the small holding. The only reason being that obviously you're not allowed to have suppressors in New Jersey, so I couldn't keep the noise to a reasonable level. And even though the person that owned the land wasn't concerned about that, I didn't want to be down there every week in, week out shooting 100, 200 rounds and making a row.
Oh yeah, so it's a shooting school here. I mean, what amazed me years ago why we went 100% suppressed was we're close to the 9/11 crash site, so we're probably maybe 10 miles away, and so there's a lot of people that visit our area. And I know one of our landowners was probably 2 miles away from the range, and we had a customer up on our range, which is in a nice, it's in a hollow area, so where the sound is sort of trapped. It doesn't travel.
Right.
But we had a customer there with a hellaciously horrible muzzle brake, and almost 2 miles away, he could hear it.
I believe it.
And I was like, he said at first he wasn't sure what the sound was, and then he was like, oh my God, that's that shooting, So instantly we were like, you know what? We can't have people hearing this all the time.
Everybody should shoot suppressed, and there shouldn't be any limitations on owning them.
Yeah, so we went.
Opinion.
Yeah, we went 100% suppressed right on the spot. It was like because we don't want to shut down and lose what we worked so hard to build there because and somebody gets annoyed with it.
Right, and we enjoy shooting, but that doesn't mean everybody else enjoys the noise, right? Yeah. So it's up to us to be
good neighbors.
Good neighbors. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so we don't shoot like we have customers that want to come in at 8 and start shooting. We don't. Normally if we're going to the range today, we'll go after lunch.
Right.
Even suppressed. So that sonic crack isn't bothering anybody. Which honestly, about 300-400 yards away from our facility, nobody hears it. But we're still just being courteous. That's exactly even to the landowner.
Yep.
So it's a good point. So. Trainers, super important, but go back to basics. Always, always, always. If you're rusty, you haven't been on the gun for a while for whatever reason, life has got you busy, your job has you got you traveling, like we have a customer overseas right now that he hasn't shot for months and months and months and months. When he comes back, he's going to have to start practicing again. He's going to have to go back to basics again and rebuild, where he left off.
I don't know what to add to that apart from just have a plan when you go to the range.
Yeah.
You know, it's. I know for a lot of people that are working hard, it's hard enough to pass out the time just to get to the range. But just make sure that once you get there, you're not thinking, well, what am I going to do now?
That's a really big point. Just don't.
Yeah.
Just pulling the trigger doesn't make you a better shooter.
No.
You've got to train to some type of level that you're going after. Set a goal.
Yep,
You know,
that's right.
Yeah, start working towards something. Before we continue on, I do want to say thanks to our last sponsor. MDT is a proud sponsor of the show. They make fantastic chassis, including the new JAE 700, which we actually have here at our shooting school. So if you attend one of our long-range shooting schools here in person, you actually get a chance to see it, shoot a little bit. They make everything from the HNT 26 to right up to the ACC Elite. They offer some new timber wooden style chassis. There's just a lot of stuff to choose from, and they're readily available. And they make them for lots of different makes and models.
I don't know about that timber style chassis. I need to look at that.
Yeah, we're going to have one on order soon.
Oh,
It's actually
good.
pretty sweet.
I know we've had some great people have been choosing some great colors for their match rifles recently. They've been coming through. We've got one on the bench right now that we're building, which is really nice as well. Interesting.
Some laminate stocks, and I try to post some pictures up of all the pretty cool colors. But we did a red one yesterday. I think there's a burnt orange one in there now.
No, it's bronze.
It's bronze.
Yes,
yeah. So
bronze.
we'll post up some pictures on our website at Facebook. But they make them for lots of different makes and models. So if you're in the market for an aftermarket chassis, custom or otherwise, getting a chassis or a rifle that fits you well. And they make them for lots of like you can get a 22 trainer with them now. So you can get your MDT ACC. You can set up for a 22 long rifle now. So you got great options there. So if you want to upgrade your shooting, you want to upgrade your rifle, stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. We'd also like to thank some new people who had joined our online long range shooting school. So thank you everybody for signing up. So our goal with the online long range shooting school was to take all the content of our 3-day school, which really is about 4 days of training in 3 days, and put it up online for those that couldn't or can't come in to attend in person. And so far, it's been great. We got probably half the content, and we're at 12 hours of instructional. And so by the time we're done, I'm thinking we're going to be around 30 to 35 hours of instruction and continuing on from there. So if you'd like to attend our online long-range shooting school, you can stop over to wolfprecision.net. It's just a monthly fee, so you can come back and you get rusty for 6 months. You can come back, re-sign back up, go through the course, and get all refreshed up again. So thank you, everybody, for signing up. Really appreciate it. A new video is released every Friday at 5 p.m. They are highlighted blue. That's how you know you're active. So you can stop over and see more at wolfprecision.net. All right, Richard, so any passing thoughts or final thoughts? We got to the range a little bit yesterday. We're going again this afternoon to test a rifle.
6mm Creedmoor is still one of my favorites.
It is. It's a fun cartridge, isn't it?
I was pleased to see the rifle performed impeccably yesterday, that the customer was shooting in 6 Creedmoor. So.
Yeah, we left them, usually with new customers that we don't know their skill set, shooting out to 700 yards takes a good driver as well as a good rifle.
Yep.
And, of course, he's a pretty good driver of a rifle.
Yeah. The customer yesterday was a super experienced shooter, and he had no problem shooting 700. In fact, it was funny because we would always direct to the larger plate. We always have pairs of plates. Excuse me. We always have pairs of plates, and we direct. As soon as he got a first round hit on the big plate, he's like, go into the smaller plate.
I wasn't even thinking about it. And our small 700-yard target is about 12 to 14 inches. So you got 7 inches from edge to center.
Edge to center. Yeah.
So it's not very merciful, and he was just cranking away at it.
Yeah. He was very gracious, though. He said his success was down to our wind calls.
Yeah, there we go.
But it's like hitting a golf ball. You still have to hit the golf ball.
That's
Even
right.
if someone tells you which club to use, you still actually have to hit the golf ball.
Yeah.
So he was fun to be around.
Well, and Don, if you listen to the podcast, I hope you have a safe trip back down to Florida. Thank you so much for taking the time to come up and join us for the day. We enjoyed having you here. So one of the things with the custom rifle is a shameless plug, but I guess just to throw it out while Don was here is if you build a custom rifle with us, whether it's a full custom rifle that Don had built or you want to do a kit, you can come in and join us for the day, do the build in the morning, go to the range, have it fitted in the afternoon. And that's a big deal. I think even Don, who had, probably 50 years behind rifles, was still pretty fascinated on all the things that he learned. Like, there's lots of little things that we take for granted here that we do all the time, including stupid little things with magazines.
Yeah, and I actually think I taught him 2 tricks for reloading as well.
Oh, so,
which was good.
So it's really awesome that we get a chance to, not only you get a chance to build your rifle in person and have hands-on and know how to, he wanted to know how to change his barrels.
Right, that's
and,
right.
And so, when he's going home, he knows how to change out his barrels. When he shoots them out, he wants to change calibers. But then, go to the range and get it fitted properly. Go get the scope set up. Go get some trigger time. Having that first experience with somebody with you to help you learn all the nuances of this brand new rifle. It's like picking up your car that you just ordered online that you've never touched and seen, and it shows up in your driveway, and you got to get in and figure out how to start it.
Right.
There's just a lot to it. So that's why Dom is here. You have that option. We really appreciate it. We have customers come in all the time for it, and we don't take that for granted. We really appreciate that. So for some updates, we're going to do some video work this weekend, maybe do a couple aerial shots of our new building. We're really excited. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, new mills and lathes coming, all kinds of really cool stuff en route. So we're excited for this next step, and just blessed that we get a chance to do it. But we'll try to push up some Facebook video on some of the building and some of the improvements, maybe just keep you up to date as we keep moving along with it. Maybe throw some stuff up on YouTube. Well, listen, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. We really appreciate it. Thank you. We had some new signups for our Patreon page. So if you want to support the podcast, you stop over to Patreon. It's $3 a month. Thank you, everybody who's done that. Also, if you'd like to leave a nice comment, we really appreciate that. And if you know anybody that's in the long-range shooting or the shooting that we do, feel free to share the podcast. It helps us a lot as well. So until the next podcast, we want to say thank you so much for everybody out there for taking the time to join us here. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host. Thank you, Richard, for joining us again.
Yeah, no problem. It was good. Same, and let's go crack some of that rust off this afternoon.
Yeah, go on to the range. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. Till next week, my name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host. You're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.